Good evening, everyone. Welcome, or good morning, depending on where you're calling from. To begin with, hello, everyone. If you're joining us for the first time, my name's Dr. Ed Farrer. I'm an ex-military doctor. I have tinnitus, and I'm also the founder of Otto. So if you're joining us again, thank you very much for joining. We've got a really exciting guest for you tonight, Frida, who is the founder of Outring Tinnitus. And Frida's just a really great example of someone that's turned their personal journey with tinnitus into a mission to help others. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear Frida's story. And Frida's helped so many people through his coaching service, guide people towards better understanding their tinnitus and also manage their tinnitus better. So he's here with you tonight to share his insights. Frida's got a presentation for you all, which he's going to give first. And then we're going to go into a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the chat. But Frida, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks, Ed, for the introduction. It's really nice to be here with all of you guys. I'm honored to be here, and I can only give the exact same flowers back to you. I mean, you deal with tinnitus yourself, so you founded something that reaches so many people all over the world and helps so many people all over the world with this condition. So I think that's fantastic, because when I started dealing with tinnitus, that was about 15 years ago. There was not that much accessible knowledge, etc., online or pretty much anywhere where people would have told you, this is how you go about it. This is the steps that can be helpful for you to pursue now. It's just like the regular ENT stuff. Try to protect your ears a little bit more, and that's it, right? So yeah, so thanks for the introduction. Let me see whether I can share my screen.
I should have turned screen sharing on, I think, so.
Let me see. All right. Can you guys see my screen then in that case?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Then let me see whether I can do the full screen here, full screen layout. Does that work for everyone? Can you see the full screen layout now?
Yep, that looks good. That looks good.
Great, fantastic. Well then, hi everyone. Again, Ed already said it. My name is Frida Kuhne. It's a little bit of a difficult name to pronounce. I'm German, from the very south of Germany originally, but I live in Berlin with my wife. I've been working as a tinnitus coach for the past 5 years, 4.5 years. And today I want to just show you a little bit of what my personal journey looked like, but then exactly also what Ed told you before, what I do as a tinnitus coach and how I approach tinnitus and the people that I work with, but also the people that we have in our community and the people who I interact and work with. So first, a little bit of a few words of encouragement. I know that is what I've been talking about today. When I started dealing with tinnitus when I was 19 years old, apart from the ENT telling me that it's relatively normal and I should be protecting my hearing more, no one told me that actually these sensations, that anxiety, all these feelings and thoughts around this condition that you deal with, there's very little help out there. And while it happened eventually, I didn't know that I was being habituated to tinnitus and that I was habituating to tinnitus. So one of the things that I always say in the content of loss is that there's hope for everyone, for every single one of you guys out there, wherever you might be on your journey right now. Habituation is possible for all of you guys. If you have a brain and if you're human, then you will be able, or then you have the potential to habituate to your tinnitus. And this is a very short personal message that I want to share with pretty much anyone who might be on this call and who might be accessing the recording later on, that there is a place where tinnitus won't bother you anymore and you can go about your life as you did before tinnitus. Because my personal story starts with being born deaf in my left ear. So I am completely deaf in my left ear. I was born that way. The right ear was more or less okay. After doing a little bit too much clubbing in my teenage years, I started getting hearing loss in my right ear. And yeah, for probably 10 years now, I also have a hearing aid in my right ear plus that tinnitus. And a few years ago, I started then working as a tinnitus coach. In 2019, I started as a tinnitus coach after working also here in a startup environment at a hearing testing app. And by now we've been helping about over 300 people from all over the world with their tinnitus and really getting them better with their tinnitus symptoms. And that's something that I have made it my mission. So in the same way that Ed has made it his mission with Otto, and you guys are on the Otto app. So fantastic work that's being done here. Today I want to share a little bit what I do as a tinnitus coach, where I come from, what the strategies are that we do in our coaching and in our community, and how some of the points that you might take from for your own journey. And of course, there's probably so many supplementary resources out there. So Ed and me, we've previously done a podcast episode on my podcast as well. So you can check that out as well. And then you can hear our conversation that is already a while ago. So Ed, it's been taking us a while until we got back together for this session here with Otto. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Just quickly, I have introduced myself, just quickly to tell you a little bit of an overview of what we've done so far. Me being a small team, including my wife, with a lot of support from my wife. So thank you in this place to my wife. Since 2019, I started the coaching and the podcast called the Outring Tinnitus podcast. In 2022, last year, after 3 years of coaching and many happy clients, we launched a community. It's an online community called My Tinnitus Club. I don't want to go too much into it. This year, I've been launching my first book on tinnitus. It's called Accepting the Unacceptable. I think it's a nice title for something that eventually will lead us into the next topic of how I approach habituation, and how maybe some of you guys can take something from this evening tonight of how you might take some of the things that I have learned as a tinnitus coach in the last few years in order to for your own habituation journey. What a tinnitus journey can look like is probably very much similar for all of you guys out there, or for most people out there, is the very first things that we need to do is we need to diagnose and establish. So you need to go to your ENT or to your audiologist or to your GP and say to them, hey, I have tinnitus, I have ringing in the ears, or I have this kind of experience, I have this symptom. Can we just please see what's going on here? And then you will get your tests, etc. Everything, in 99% of all cases, everything will be fine. And then the real work starts from a perspective of probably what Ed and the Otto team are perfectly doing and perfectly capable of doing, to first of all, in the very first step, and that's also what I understand as my coach, because that's exactly what I started dealing with, right? I didn't know I knew what tinnitus was, but I didn't know that up to 20 to 25% of the population would be dealing with it, right? So a basic level of understanding what tinnitus is and what it isn't is so much more empowering than being left with there's nothing we can do, and just go back home and don't get upset and stressed about it. Because as soon as this mind-body connection with tinnitus, where we focus on the sound and then we have an emotional reaction, or we have thoughts about it, an emotional reaction, the release of chemicals in our body that drive our system and really get us worked up, etc. And that is sort of the feedback loop in which tinnitus is the always constant 24/7 intruder that we can't seem to be getting rid of, etc. And then if we would just educate people about this reaction a little bit more, probably unfortunately in our modern healthcare system. I know, Ed, I've been also working with people from the UK, so neither the German healthcare system nor the NHS has a proper address to really telling GPs or ENTs that they can sit down for 40 minutes and explain the person what they're actually going through with their tinnitus. So that's where your work and also part of my work comes in. So the first step, again, is just, without making this too complicated here, is really to educate the person what they're dealing with and what they're not dealing with, and to really also take stock. And this leads me to the second point: take stock and observe what elements of your tinnitus really make it bothersome to you. Because I've recently done a podcast interview with Dr. Craig Casper, an ENT and tinnitus specialist from New York. And he said, and this was a fantastic quote, I thought, when you've seen one tinnitus patient, you've seen one tinnitus patient. I mean, they might have similar stories of how it started, or the hearing loss progression, etc. But really, if you've seen one person with tinnitus, you've seen one person with tinnitus. And if for every single person, different aspects of their tinnitus make it bothersome to them, and chat and get different reactions and different feelings and emotions going in them. So it is incredibly helpful to observe and learn what elements of your tinnitus are bothersome to you, and in order to really uncover sort of deeply ingrained belief systems that have maybe made it more normal than not to react to your tinnitus in a certain way. Like when you get out of bed in the morning, the first thing you hear it, you're like, oh, there it goes again. How will I get through the day today, right? And if we have that thought the next time we go to boil the water in the kettle, or we make the coffee, we're like, oh man, it's still there. So whenever we in these transitioning moments, it's constantly bugging us. And our natural response is always like, oh my goodness. And then the stress response comes, right? So you get it. So the second step is absolutely observe, to learn your reaction, and to slowly but steadily start to question that belief system that you have every single time when your tinnitus seems to be challenging coming up, and boom, you're on the slide down into the mud, basically. Third step, and I want to make this brief now, practicing tools from cognitive behavior therapy, strange tools, cognitive behavior therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy, which is more based in the mindfulness realm. And we know fantastic stuff out there from Jennifer Gann's mindfulness-based stress reduction for tinnitus. Fantastic stuff. Or we know how many studies are out there right now that depression can be treated by mindfulness. Nearly, I'm not saying always, but nearly, there's studies that indicate that, as well as tools of mindfulness and implementing tools of mindfulness into people's lives. So forming new associations with your tinnitus is then the next key, right? The first one is observing your reaction, and the second one is forming these new associations with that tinnitus. That doesn't mean that, oh yeah, I just got to think positive now, and then suddenly my tinnitus will stop bothering me. No, that's of course impossible, because something that's bothersome to you is bothersome to you. But the first thing is to practice tools of mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy in order to allow you to feel whatever is going on, and then to slowly but steadily building a new association with tinnitus. And that brings me to my next point. Point number 4 is build and fine-tuned. It's what I do in my coaching process, and also what we do in the community. Is we build your practices, we discuss the obstacles that you might be facing, and you can share your progress with other people or with the coach. And probably you do that. I'm very sure you do that with Otto as well, and adjust accordingly, right? So the core principles as it relates to acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness-based strategies are, I always like to use the metaphor of spider phobia, and that's why I looked at the ceiling. If people with spider phobia are treated with acceptance and commitment therapy, then they might at the start of that therapeutic approach have a very strong reaction towards a spider. And that very, very strong reaction towards that spider might be coming up every single time they go into a room where there's a spider. And here in Europe, we all know, I mean, no, I haven't seen anyone from Australia now, right? So any guys, people from Australia, please don't take me by my word. But here in Europe, here in Germany, we have no dangerous spiders. So anyone who has a severe reaction to a spider, it 100% of the time is an overreaction, and it's not necessary to the stimulus that we are exposed to. So in the same way that you can unlearn this reaction to your spider, you can unlearn your reaction to tinnitus. Right? Some of you guys will know the Pavlovian conditioning, where the dog salivates, ring the bell, you react in that way, dog gets the food, etc. Right? So the same thing is true for tinnitus and spider phobia, for also other conditions like insomnia. And it's very, very important that we build a new relationship with the tinnitus underlyingly, because I'm telling you, and Ed can tell you, and many other people on the internet and great videos and resources can tell you, that a guy like me, yeah, who some of you guys or some people would online argue like, he is deaf on one ear, so he can absolutely not hear anything on one ear, has a tinnitus and a hearing aid in the other ear. How can he just go about his life without being bugged about tinnitus and be reminded constantly about that he has tinnitus? Well, only if he's habituated and his brain has categorized tinnitus as what it is, a benign body sensation that I don't need to be upset about. So the next step then is, after building and fine-tuning, to see like, okay, where are your current obstacles? Where do you really need to maybe go into a few more sessions? Probably also with Otto, probably you guys do pretty much the same journey for people, where you build and fine tune then the first learnings that people have to say, okay, how do we need to adjust your progress now in order to really make it work for you, and to see, okay, what are the obstacles that keep you from making the last progress. Living your life is super important, because when we reduce our life to battling tinnitus, we will lose that battle probably every single time. Same with insomnia, same with spider phobia. If we want to get rid of the emotions, but we don't work through our association with the thing that triggers our emotion, then we're not going to succeed. So living your life sends a powerful message to your brain that you're willing to continue with whatever you're doing, although feeling not as nice sometimes due to your tinnitus and having troubles with your tinnitus sometimes. That's absolutely okay. All of us are going through it, sometimes a very, very, very difficult period in our life. And I've seen it in many, many people, and probably you here in the Otto community as well. But it's absolutely crucial that you send that message to your brain: I'm continuing my life. Of course, it's smart to make a few adjustments, to say, maybe I will skip that rave festival where I will be exposed to 120 decibel of techno music over the period of 10 hours if I'm dealing with acute tinnitus right now. But other than that, right, live your life sends a fantastic message to your brain, where your brain goes like, he is willing to continue anyhow with all the things. And then slowly but steadily, I can learn that what I'm doing around living my life, and these tools and practices that I'm including in order to get my brain closer to habituation, these two things, they start coming together. And I can feel that the more and more I do that, and the more I practice that, the less burden I experience from my tinnitus. And then I can go into step number 6, habituate and be beyond. Habituation is something that comes unforced. It's like learning to swim. If you're drowning, it's very unlikely you will learn to swim, because when you're drowning, you're fighting for your life. And when you fight, your energy goes away and you're done. Same thing with driving a car. If you were put in a car, you don't know how to drive a car, it's a life-threatening situation, probably not very smart. Sleeping, the same thing. If you try to control your sleep, the more you try to control your sleep, the less you're actually going to have control over it, because it's something that happens in our bodies without any conscious effort. And the more you try to force it upon yourself, the more you're going to be aware of it, the more stress you're going to create, the more stress hormones are going to be relieved, and it's going to be seen as a problem. And you have operant conditioning, which is going to lead you to continue to react in that certain way. So your brain, through repetitive action vis-a-vis tinnitus, can keep itself from habituation, and you are the one who responds to how you react to your tinnitus, and therefore also you determine how quickly you will be able to habituate. And through this repetitive cycle, either of things that will get you closer to habituation or things that will move you further away, you will habituate all by itself, right? But it's not that easy to say, like, I'll just have to go through it, and because there are certain things that can exacerbate your tinnitus symptoms, and there are things that can make it better. And I think everyone has a little bit of different approaches in here, and my approach is maybe different from other people's approach. I have built my own over the last 4.5 years, and today I want to share also a little bit with you guys how we do that. So how do we get people to habituate to their tinnitus, and what have I found most valuable? And the very first thing I can say is the community that we build, probably similar also what you see in Otto, a place where people come together for events like this one right now, where you chat with other members, but all in a moderated way. So and this is probably also something that you guys have learned, being in these forums where absolute mayhem is going, there's a lot of people who drive themselves further away from habituation. The same way that I told you, the more you control your sleep, the worse probably it gets. So the more you try to control your tinnitus and your process of habituating, and you compare yourself to how well you're doing, the more it's probably going to drive you away from habituating to it. And that's what happens in these unmoderated forums. So that's why it's so important to have a sense of community, but to have that in a frame where you're safe and where there's someone who moderates these experiences, which I'm sure you guys do at Otto as well. And the same what we're doing here right now through coaching calls, online tinnitus coaching calls, accountability check-ins, saying, okay, what are your current obstacles? Where do you want to be in the future? What are you dealing with right now? And these sort of constant coaching calls that sort of hold each other accountable, but also sweep in positivity to say like, okay, the last 2 weeks I wanted to do this, and now I can do that, and now I'm going on, and that really worked well for me. So that's something that we also find very, very valuable with our strategies. And the last one, and this is always going to be an absolutely free of charge resource, my Tinnitus podcast and YouTube content, accessible for all of you guys out there. Again, I already did the episode together with Ed. That was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for, probably you already have a lot of podcasts and a lot of content to consume. But if there's one more, and if you like what I've been telling you tonight, then go check these resources out. Should we already look into some questions? Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for taking us through that, Frida. It's really, really interesting stuff, and certainly echoes so much of what we say and so much of how we help people to understand their own tinnitus and manage tinnitus. So, you know, really, really resonates, and I'm sure will resonate with many people here as well. So yeah, let's jump into the questions. So we've got a few coming through. So first question here from Giselle. So Giselle describes tinnitus that changes quite frequently. So her tinnitus will ramp up for a few days, then it will get quiet again, and then she'll feel like she's back to the drawing board. Is this intermittent tinnitus? Is this normal? And can she habituate? She's been like this for 18 months. Is habituation still possible?
I mean, again, my question to her would be if she's human and if she has a brain. No, let me I take that very seriously. I know that a lot of people say when tinnitus changes a lot, it's more difficult to habituate. I say yes and no. It is a little bit more challenging as when it's not as bad. So you could argue it both ways. When it's not as bad, it might be much easier for you to deal with your tinnitus. But when it's especially bad, then you constantly have this toss and turn, and you constantly have this push and pull, which in fact leads you susceptible to a greater fluctuations also in emotions. So the one day it's great that your tinnitus is very low, and the next day you're absolutely at -100 because it fluctuates again. But again, the thing that we've been talking tonight a lot about, and what you probably also talk a lot about, Ed, maybe your response to the question afterwards interesting as well. It's not the tinnitus itself that what is your underlying problem here, but the problem here is your reactivity towards the tinnitus. And my answer to that would also be, if you say you have a bad day with loud tinnitus volume, and you could have affirmative action, so learn that even on a loud day you can go after your hobbies, you can perform well at your job, you can do whatever you want in your life. And if the loud days, right, bear with me, the quiet days are not your problem, the loud days are your problem, and then the difference between those two. But if you can signal to yourself and to your brain that even on the loud days you are willing to continue with everything that you are doing, you're willing to acknowledge and accept that, then you can slowly but steadily start to moderate that massive anxiety response that you have on such a loud day. And if that response is diminished a little bit, then a loud day loses a little bit of its fear quality, right? Then maybe you don't have to fear or fight a loud day as much anymore.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, Giselle, I suspect what happens is when you have that fear and that anxiety of those days when your tinnitus ramps up, and then when the tinnitus does ramp up, you think, oh God, I'm back to square one now. But actually you're not back to square one, because you've had all those good days where your tinnitus hasn't been much of a problem. So although and that's where journaling is really important as well, because when you journal, you'll recognize that actually the frequency of bad days that you have is going down. So definitely there's some really interesting stuff there. And if we had a bit more time, I'd love to dig in a bit more. But let's go on to the next question. Victoria. So Victoria is having some trouble waking up in the morning, and the first thing that happens is she notices her tinnitus. and she has that feeling of, oh God, there it is again. How am I gonna go through this day with this tinnitus again? What would you recommend? How could you stop that kind of negative response cycle? How could you interrupt that? What would you recommend?
The first thing I would recommend is not trying to stop it, because it's like when I tell you don't think of a pink elephant, and everyone in this call will immediately be thinking of a pink elephant. It's that exact it's that exact conditioning where we try to, in essence, what your brain is doing, it tries to protect you. It has categorized tinnitus as something negative. Therefore, of course, the negative association with your tinnitus is trying to be avoided. So your brain doesn't want this reaction. So when you wake up in the morning, first thing you hear it, of course, you try anything to avoid it. But what happens, in fact, is the more you avoid it, the more you create the negative reaction, the more stress hormones are released, the more it confirms to your brain that you're dealing with an actually dangerous thing, because your brain can't distinguish whether you're fighting tinnitus or a lion who's charging at you. So the big thing for her, I would say, is don't try to stop it. Because when you try to stop it, that's exactly when your focus is going to be exacerbated on it. And you're going to be really focusing on it. And that's going to be driving you mad the whole day. Rather, and this is, I know this sounds contradictory. This sounds really contradictory. But what I say to some of the people, why don't you put tinnitus on your shoulder and take him with you for the first 2 hours? And when you do that, you integrate him in your morning routine, and you say, like, he's sitting here with me on my shoulder, making a cup of tea. And then I'm telling you, when you tell your brain the experience of tinnitus is safe, then you have the best chance of suddenly sitting there reading your newspaper, forgetting that you were focusing on tinnitus. And that's how slowly but steadily habituation happens.
Yeah, that's really, I've not heard that before, but I'm going to start giving that piece of advice. It's I love that. It's, and you know, we get this a lot as well. It's your reaction is to fight it. Your reaction is to say, I need to try and ignore this. I need to do everything I need to do everything I can to try and forget that my tinnitus is there. But the more you try to fight it, the more you try to ignore it, and you force yourself to try and ignore it, the harder it becomes, the more stressed you get, the more anxious you get. Look, if you can't ignore it, you can't ignore it. It's with you. Your tinnitus is going to be there, and you know, if, as Frida said, you know, accept that tinnitus is going to be there with you, and pretty quickly you'll actually start to forget that it's there.
It's like
okay.
If I can make this one last comment, and this is the perfect example. The more you struggle against being awake at night, the more you will not be able to get back to sleep. It's the same example. So you wake up in the middle of the night, and the difference between an insomniac, someone who has trouble sleeping, and a normal sleeper is, what do? They wake up. The normal sleeper wakes up and says, oh, I still got 3 hours, turns around and sleeps again. The insomniac has developed an aversion against being awake at night. And that conditioning will lead them to release stress hormones, because they've associated being awake at night with something dangerous. Therefore, they won't sleep again. Same is true for tinnitus. You build this aversion, you have this connection of negative and unwanted, you're going to be focusing more on it. And that's, I think, one of the crucial things that people need to understand first. And that's, I mean, it's a difficult thing, and people need to be in the right place in order to understand and to be willing to do that. Because, of course, too many people say, I want to go to the doctor's office, get a pill, and be done with this.
Yeah. And just to be clear as well, I would say that it's this reaction that your brain has isn't something that, you know, don't feel guilty about having that reaction. It's just an automatic thing that your brain has done to try and protect you. It's a protective mechanism, isn't it? Your brain is trying to protect you from this. And all we need to do is try and teach your brain that it doesn't need to protect you. This thing's fine. It's not going to hurt you. Okay, so really good question here from Jill. So Jill said she's assumed, Frida, you've never tried a hearing aid in your left ear. How does the right hearing aid affect your tinnitus? Has it helped?
Yes, 100%. I mean, if I don't have my hearing aid in, I mean, apart from the fact that I would only understand 50% of the things, right? Because my hearing loss is quite severe in the higher frequencies already. So I can't watch TV without my hearing aid, for example. So the thing for me is, with my hearing aid, I hear 50% more, which is masking the tinnitus. So I don't need it, but for me, I mean, I wouldn't have to mask the tinnitus, but the tinnitus in and of itself is obviously something that's much more in the foreground as soon as I take my hearing aid out, because I will really honestly be, I mean, not deaf, of course not, but I literally will be hard of hearing when I don't have my hearing aid in. So I do rely on my hearing aid. When I take my hearing aid out, my hearing is really not great, and I really have to ask my wife to repeat the things 10 times. For example, when my battery dies, when we're on a trip somewhere or something. Usually I always have batteries with me, but sometimes it happens, right? And then I will just have to ask her over and over again. But to be telling you another side of the story, at night I sleep with an earplug. My ENT doesn't like it so much because I always have something in my ear, hearing aid or earplug. But I prefer to just sleep with an earplug at night and just have my tinnitus present and nothing else. So I sleep on my right ear, my left ear is nothing hearing. But the hearing aid, yes, if you have an indication for a hearing aid, do it absolutely, because the last thing you want is to hear less than you actually could, because of course, even with the presence of tinnitus, your brain and your auditory processing is going to be hijacked so much already that you need the best possible support that you can get. So if you have an indication for a hearing aid, absolutely go for it. It's a huge help.
Yeah, I would just echo that as well. We had a speaker last week actually talking about hearing aids and tinnitus. If you have a hearing loss, hearing aid could be helpful. If you haven't had your hearing checked recently, go and get it checked, because a hearing aid can be helpful for tinnitus. Okay, question from Julie. So Julie's asking, is it possible to habituate? So Julie has pulsatile tinnitus, and Julie's asking, can I habituate to pulsatile tinnitus so it no longer bothers me?
Yeah. I get that question a lot as well. And I would say yes, because it's not the pulsatile. Again, it's the same thing, right? It's the same mechanism whereby we have attached meaning to a stimulus that we perceive. And it doesn't matter whether it's crickets, ringing, humming, buzzing, or pulsatile. Like it's the same thing. You have a conditioning based on something that you experience. In a way, you could see. I mean, I'll often compare this, right? When you go out into a bright sunny day and you have these little things in front of your eyes, yeah, or you could sozusagen unhabituate to these things and always get focused and hooked on them and be like, what do I have in front of my eyes? What's wrong with my eyes, right? And the same thing is true for, if we wanted to, we could create a negative aversion to our heartbeats. And I'm sure there is a condition like that. I haven't checked it. I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist. We're sure there's an aversion to our heartbeats, right? So we could develop the same kind of reaction to benign body sensation. It can absolutely happen. And in that same vein, it's 100% the same mechanism by which the brain perceives the sound that you experience, because it is a sound, the pulsatile tinnitus, as something, I mean, it's an indicator that you're alive. So that's, I guess, also something positive.
Great, thank you, Frida. So question from Rafe, do we know why tinnitus changes so much? Is it a physical change? Is it your brain interpreting it differently? So Rafe has a steady tone, but also has another tone in 2 or 3 variants. Guys, really common to have tinnitus that varies and changes. Frida, do you know anything about this? Do we know why tinnitus changes so much?
I would have to revert back to the answer by Dr. Craig Casper. It's incredibly individual why tinnitus changes. When we go through stressful periods, our stress response is heightened. We do know, in the same way that you said earlier on, Ed, when our fear and panic-based center with the lion thing is overactivated, the auditory cortex automatically is also more activated, meaning that when you're being attacked by something, all your senses become sharpened. Right. So if you are in a state of hyperarousal because you're stressed at work, you're not sleeping well, your brain is in a state of hyperarousal, then it's very likely that the added activity in your auditory cortex leads to an added perception of tinnitus as well. So, and then there are many, many other factors, right? Like I have podcast interviews with people who talk about TMJ, so problems with neck and jaw, etc., right? And all these kind of things that all go hand in hand. We are more stressed, our muscles become more tense, ergo our tinnitus becomes louder. So I think it's incredibly individual, and you have to sort of be gentle with yourself in finding out what triggers it, but then, you know, not always try to avoid it, but it's maybe a little bit more easy to find that compassion and not be so anxious about it when you know, oh yeah, well, I've had that glass of wine last night and that's why my tinnitus is louder, or I haven't been sleeping well lately, or I've been having stress at work and therefore my tinnitus is louder. The most important thing is not to pour more fuel into the fire than necessary, right? If this creates even more stress on you, that you say, why is it changing this much? Then you even heightening the stress response rather than saying, oh yeah, there's probably a reason for it. That's it.
Yeah. And we get that question. We get that question a lot as well. It's really common for tinnitus to change. The thing to put your energy into, as Frida says, the thing to focus on is not the fact that your tinnitus is changing, but focus on how it makes you feel when your tinnitus does change. Because that's the thing that's making this notable for you and making this unpleasant for you. And if you can change how you feel when it changes, you're not really, you're going to get to the point where you don't notice if it changes. Okay. So, question from Jordan. So Jordan had, after scuba diving, has tinnitus from almost a year, which is intermittent. And they say that they totally relate to feeling really good when it's good, but then kind of feel like they're back to square one again when it's bad. What would you recommend in terms of handling these really significant changes in mood and feelings about how you're managing your tinnitus? How would you handle that?
So the first part of the question was about the scuba diving, to which I can not really give an answer because I'm not a medical doctor.
So I think the question, sorry, I kind of made a bit of a hash of that. I think the question is primarily around how do you handle the mood swings that tinnitus gives us when it gets really bad after it's been good for a period?
Yeah. The first thing is that there are many other things that cause our mood to be high or low than just tinnitus. And often what we do is we neglect that. So we are not fair to ourselves and to our tinnitus in saying that if only my tinnitus wasn't like this, I would always be in a perfect mood. So we have to stop kidding ourselves. And sometimes life is tough. Again, I launched the book last week, and I did get very little sleep. So although I was super hyper and happy about launching the book, I was like physically a little bit shattered last weekend. So, I mean, honestly, sometimes there are these times in our lives where we just have to sit with these emotions rather than fighting them and creating even more turmoil. So the one, and from an acceptance and commitment point of perspective, is if you could start learning how to tolerate the lowest part of your mood better. Yeah. So if the absolute lowest points would be classified as a little bit like, even if they're still the same in intensity and the same way they are, if you start going into that and familiarizing yourself with that, that's a very deep acceptance and commitment therapy methodology. You familiarize yourself with that, and you might as well discover that these very, very low lows are a little bit less low lows than you think. Most of the time they are very low lows because your brain is just saying, I've known this low low before, it feels terrible, and that's what it is. Taking you out of the option to say, well, how can every day is usually different? How could it be exactly the same today? It might be a little bit different. So give yourself the opportunity to experience it a little bit more, and to open yourself up to the fact that it might not always only be about tinnitus when we have super low days, right? Sometimes it is, but it's very, very important not to create that massive burden of always saying, if only my tinnitus wasn't there, all other areas in my life and aspects would always be fantastic, which is simply not true. I mean, I would hope that it would for all of you guys out there, and also for you, Ed, but we all know that life is a continuous up and down, and tinnitus is a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just want to mention, so Nancy's given some advice here as well, which is really good advice. And Nancy says she uses her CBT skills on both good and not so good days. So, if you prepare, and you mentioned this as well, Frida, preparing yourself for when your tinnitus is about having a bad day and practicing so that when you have that, as the metaphor you mentioned is, when you're drowning, if you're drowning, you know how to swim, right? So practice these skills. So when you have a bad day, you've got something in the back of your pocket to get out, and you're prepared for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to do 2 more questions. So question from Chad: do you have tinnitus in your deaf ear? Is that possible?
I don't. So the deaf ear, but there's a reason for it. There is no connection to the auditory cortex. There was my mom had an infection during pregnancy. and the hearing nerve is not properly developed. Therefore, I have no stimulation from the left ear. So no tinnitus in my left ear.
Got it. Final question. So question from an anonymous attendee. So this person's been on a flight and noticed that the volume of their tinnitus has increased afterwards. Is that something you've experienced before? Flights, the link between going on a flight and tinnitus.
I would say the flight itself not, but there is one big mistake that many people make with flying. It's not the airplane or the pressurized cabin or anything itself, but it's the fact that the cabin noise is about 76, 77, 78 decibels, maybe depending on the type of aircraft. And the problem is not the noise of the cabin or the plane itself, because those levels are absolutely fine, safety regulations wise and stuff. But the problem is when you then pop in these cheap headphones that they give you and you try to listen to a movie and your hearing is already not perfectly great anymore, what do? Naturally, you crank up the volume. So when you then listen to a movie for 8 hours at 90 something decibels, then surely it's tricky for your hearing, right? It's not the greatest thing to do. Quick word of advice. Get yourself some lovely noise cancellation headphones for flights. They are miracle wonders. The only other thing, but that would be for a medical doctor, if you have any kind of physical obstruction to the eardrum, ETD, so eustachian tube dysfunction, any kind of that things, of course, that has to be monitored when you fly, because changes in pressure, they could change your tinnitus. But any other things, flying should be safe. And only maybe in reactive tinnitus cases that the level of sound afterwards remains, and therefore you're a little bit more triggered from a perspective, and therefore you hear your tinnitus a little bit louder, but nothing to worry about in general.
Great. Okay, Frida, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really interesting presentation, and great insight with these answers as well. How can people find out more about you? Where can people go to hear more about your coaching and your book and your content?
Yeah, absolutely. I've one more thing. The book here launched last week. It's tinnitus-book.com, www.tinnitus-book.com. That's the one thing. If you guys want to, you can send me questions to Frida at outringtinnitus.com or go to outringtinnitus.com. Any of these will do. And yeah, that's all we do. That's what we do. That's what we like to support with. That's what Ed and his team are supporting you with. And of course, I wish all of you guys here in the call and everyone who's listening to this, of course, all the best on their journey.
Thank you very much. And we're getting lots of messages saying thanks in the chat as well, Frida. So really appreciate your time. Really interesting presentation. For those of you that are joining, thanks for joining again. We run these webinars every week, so do come along to the next one. And if there's any topics you'd like covered, please do send us a message. We're always looking for interesting things to talk about. Frida, thanks so much for your time, and I'm sure we will catch up soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for hosting this, Ed.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.